Welcome to another Grief Talk Coffee Chat episode. I'm your host, Vaughn Solis. Okay, so welcome to the first episode of Divine Healing Coaching with Vaughn Solis. I, of course, am Vaughn, and I'm so happy that you're with me today. In this first episode, that is the introduction to a series of coaching episodes that I'm going to be offering on the Grief Talk podcast. We are going to start diving into spiritual thought and metaphysics to expand our consciousness and to consider anything that is happening in our life, regarding our experiences, our relationships, our money, anything you can think of, all the things that have happened to us, our childhood, issues that are rearing up in our adulthood, all of these things when considered under the umbrella, if you will, of spiritual philosophy and metaphysical thought, truly give us an opportunity to consider our life, our experiences, our lessons, our relationships, our money, and our childhood issues with a much greater scope of consciousness, and one that once you do go down this path, you basically don't turn back from it, because it's kind of like you can't turn the tap off. So I began my spiritual practice and journey into understanding metaphysics, which really in a very simple way is understanding anything in terms of more than just our physical experience, those things that we can see and readily explain. Metaphysics and spiritual practice is just so much more than that. And the longer you're in this, and sometimes it isn't even the length of time, sometimes it's just an experience that brings us to our knees, if not flat on the ground, that we can't handle it just by ourselves in this human body. And we invite and allow greater forces. I'm not talking about dark ones, they exist, but that's not what I'm talking about. We invite greater, powerful, positive forces into our life to help us try and make sense of the human experience. There are many mediums out there, and most people would have been living under a rock if they haven't heard the term medium. Myself, I actually studied for a week with James von Prague, and discovered that, I was actually pretty good at that, but it wasn't a dimension I really wanted to work in too much. I became an Angel Healing Practitioner, certifying under Doreen Virtue way back in 2006, and that was 9 months after my daughter died in July 2005. I had a strong affinity with angels. Actually, only about 7 months before my daughter took her life in the July 2005, my sister introduced me to the idea of working with angels. I jumped on the bandwagon, even despite my enormous suffering and grief at that time. And I've never looked back. I've only broadened and expanded my awareness and capacity to entertain more than we know in only the seen. And that largely is because I already had at the time that Janaya passed a 23-year practice that I had to rely on to get me through what without a doubt was the worst experience of my life. Hopefully it's the last worst experience of my life like that. So when we start at the beginning, for me, how do we come here? So this coaching episode is called Yes, We Do Choose Our Parents. And there is a reason for that. Very early on in my spiritual journey and, consuming a lot of books and so on, I did come across this concept over and over and over that, we do choose our parents, we choose our experiences, we choose the lessons that we're here to get. We actually design our lessons, but in human form, as a human physical being, we obviously have to have the mind, the brain that kind of clicks with that and go, I think there's a lesson in here somewhere. And so when you adopt this idea, and I'm not forcing it on anybody. It's just something that has to feel aligned with, who you are and your understanding of your experience in this world and how you want to go about living in this world, which can be pretty tough at times. There are many, 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 many spiritual leaders that say this is the toughest place to come and learn your lessons. And maybe it is. I don't know. But choosing to get things that make sense, and you can go, okay, I'll now move on to the next lesson, because we're never without our lessons. Turning to the spiritual, turning to the metaphysical is, in my books, the only way you can really do it. We can learn things from other humans, but listen, they can only teach us so much, and to the extent that they themselves have absorbed knowledge and wisdom and experience. So, starting with choosing our parents. So just to put this in context, I have, I guess, 2 children. My daughter was born in 1983. She visited me for nearly 10 years in my dreams before she was born. And when she was born, she looked exactly like she did in the dreams. Now, when this little baby would come to me in my dreams, I had a dream about a baby. But as I got into my early 20s, because she was born when I was in my mid-20s, I started to wonder and think about, am I going to have a little girl? And when I met her biological father, I'm not going to talk about how I met him, but it was in the most bizarre circumstances. And I looked at him and I said, that man is going to be the father of my little girl. And true enough, amongst hundreds of people in the setting that I was in, he marched right over to me a couple hours later. We met, and he did become her father. Fast forward about 5-6 years later, I started to feel very connected to pictures of little blonde, blue-eyed boys. The age I was most drawn to in connecting to this image was about 2 years old. And anytime I saw certain little tykes that were coming to me as blonde, blue-eyed, I would be like, oh my goodness. And I don't know what I was feeling about that, because at that time, I did not know I was going to ever have another child. I was single, and it wasn't in the cards for me. I wasn't pining for another child. But one day, about 2 years after that, so these images were coming to me, I was seeing these pictures and so on. 2 years after that, I actually decided, I think it's time to get married. And so not going to lie, I'm married 32 years now, and I did meet my husband on a dating site before the internet, folks. And it's a very interesting story. And we got married in 1991, and sure enough, in 1992, we had a son together who's blonde, blue-eyed. And, he was blonde at the time. And I said to my husband, who at that time, we were engaged after 2 weeks, and I said to him, we're going to have a little boy together. And he was obviously very intrigued by any kind of insights that I was having at that time. And he trusted and he believed me. And as I said, here we are. And our son is just about 31. So it's really easy when life is going really, really well to consider, I chose mom and dad. They are wonderful. If you even let your brain go there and your mind. But when things are like full of dysfunction and there's tragedy and there's sorrow and there's a whole bunch of things going on and abuse and all of these things, it's very, very challenging to consider, I chose my parents? Why would I do this to myself? Why would I chose to be punished, abandoned, abused, like in any other negative, not respected, whatever, like the problems, the issues that as adults, we all end up having with our parent at one point or another. So I'm asking you only to consider this information today. If you can't absorb it and agree with it, but you're intrigued, fine. Let yourself be intrigued. All I'm doing is passing on information that's decades old from other people that I chose to go, you know what? This feels right for me. And when I lost my daughter, Janaya, to suicide in July 2005, I didn't even question that we had chosen to be together. At that point, More what I then looked to is the soul contract, which I'm going to be talking about in the next Divine Healing Coaching episode. But for today, I'll just mention the soul contract. So if we choose our parents, and we can stretch it a little bit further, that we choose all of our relationships, right? And then something really, really bad happens, because we really don't look for reasons why something really, really good happens. We're just kind of grateful and happy it happened, but we don't really dwell on it. When we entertain the idea of the soul contract, and who contracted for what and why, and then we can look back at our childhood experiences and tie it in and kind of see where mom and dad and, or mom and mom, or dad and dad today, but whatever, the parental guardian role, what their actions represented, who they were, how they thought, how they behaved, how they treated us, how we treated and thought of them as we grew older. And you know what? You can even go back to some points in childhood and recall feelings and emotions and thoughts toward one or both of your parents. Whether you trusted them, they scared you, they confused you. I came from the spanking age, and it was humiliating to be spanked by this large man who was 6'1" or 6'2", and I was this tiny little thing at the time, and bend over, whip down your pants, and you get spanked. I mean, those things haunt you for decades, because it affects our self-worth. How our parents treat us and respect or don't respect us affects every aspect of our being, but starting with basically our self-worth and our self-acceptance. When we feel we have been abandoned or betrayed and not loved by them. And it may or may not come as a surprise to you that any adult who has had a difficult or an estranged relationship with a parent, the number one thing they want, and I've met a lot of, adult men, pining for this from their father, not necessarily so much from their mom, but their dad, is their love and acceptance, and that they're worthy enough for them. I don't even think they care about having the respect at that age. They just want to know that that parent loved them and wanted them and accepts them. We want their approval. And so the relationship we have to our parent from birth to death, their own or ours if we go before them, is one that whether you acknowledge it or don't acknowledge it, if you don't have their acceptance and approval, deep down somewhere inside, there is something within us telling us repeatedly, and sometimes showing us in the physical, all the attempts that we're making at needing and wanting their approval. And it was really interesting, as a little aside, when my daughter died in 2005, I'd been estranged from my dad for 18 years. Had a really close relationship with my mom, but not my dad. And so after she died, there was a family reunion arranged. And so my husband and our son went. We met up with my siblings and some of my, extended family. And at that point, my dad was only 80, and he was in a nursing home suffering from Parkinson's at the time. He was fairly alert. He kind of got stuck in long memories rather than, short memory working for him. But when he saw me and we hugged, he was a skeletal figure at that point, still tall, but, a skeletal figure. And I hugged him, and my world felt safe again. It had only been 4 months since my daughter had died, and it felt safe. And I remember one day, we were only there for a week, and I saw him as many times as I could in that home he was in for that week. And one day, a lunch was arranged, and we went to this lunch. And my dad was so happy to be out of the home. And he was sitting beside me on a couch in the living room. And you know what? He put his hand on my leg and tapped sort of my knee. And he said, "Everything is all right again. My little girl is home." Right? And I never saw him after that because he died about 15 months later. But it gave me such joy and peace to know that my dad loved me and my dad accepted me, because one of the things that had frightened me the most about seeing my dad again after 18 years was that he would think I was a terrible mother because my daughter had chosen to end her life. So you see, I was seeking his approval, but I didn't know it until he said those words, "My little girl is home again." So considering you've chosen your parents and you're coming from a relationship with one or both of them that has been dysfunctional, difficult, estranged, or painful, if not traumatic in any other way, of which, of course, there's many traumatic experiences that we can feel, even getting whacked on your butt as a form of spanking or corporal punishment. Understand that when we can consider this was our choice, up in the heavens, if you like, that dimension in the unseen, where we sit there and design, float around, I guess, and design our incarnation and go, I'm going to come into this incarnation. I want it to be focused on, these lessons with this type of theme. And, you might even throw in your purpose here. And I need to have these relationships for tick, 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 all of this to happen, especially and most importantly, starting with, who am I going to choose to birth me into this world? You can take it down all the way to race, gender, country, nationality, economics, siblings, how many there are going to be. The list is endless when you can play with this and kind of have fun with it, sort of like painting a picture, and throw anything and everything at you and going, now, if I didn't have these parents, it isn't so much about the siblings at this moment, but if I didn't have these parents, this, and this wouldn't have happened or couldn't have happened. And I see how by choosing this theme, and there are a lot of themes, so I'm not going to go into them. Mine has been parenting and loss and suicide. Major themes in my life. Those, like if I didn't have these parents, I wouldn't be able to fulfill these lessons. I wouldn't be able to fulfill the incarnation in that theme or themes. I would not be able to complete these lessons, learn these specific lessons, and I might not find my purpose, my career, I wouldn't essentially be who I am today without where it all began. So there is a huge opportunity to tap into your personal power when you become responsible for your life, for your choices, for all of your experiences, including, I chose my parents. And if I didn't choose my parents, further to the themes and the lessons and the experiences I mentioned, you might not even be able to fulfill certain roles that you've designed for yourself in this incarnation. In fact, it is the relationship that we have to our parents from, babyhood, obviously, but from the point that we can remember aspects of this relationship, the ones that are the most dominant for us, that shape us. This is where we derive a lot of our life lessons from. Other relationships matter, but we derive an awful lot of our life lessons and how we evolve and who we actually are becoming simply by the relationship we've had with our parents. good or bad. And sometimes, by the way, I want to throw in here, just because you may have chosen a relationship, a parent-child relationship that is super dysfunctional, does not mean that you actually can't be led to a beautiful, purposeful life that is the complete opposite of how you were raised. In fact, quite a lot of people probably find their purpose and what they do in healing and counseling and therapy and all kinds of other good work because of how they were raised, not wanting to repeat it again. You may even have chose some kind of dysfunction or abuse or alcoholism or addiction or poverty or any other number of experiences as a child yourself, just so that you can stop the cycle and not pass this on to future generations. Life lessons and themes are almost all rooted in our relationship that we have to our parents, who they were, how they behaved, their own problems, and what we are choosing to do to not repeat those things, or in the positive, because there is a positive to this, flourish from what they taught us. Now, one of the things to be careful of when you go down this path and consider, yes, I chose my parents, and you hate them, are angry at them. I don't actually know if anyone hates their parents, but maybe they do. Are frustrated with them, you just can't connect, you long to be closer, you long for their approval, but you're not getting any of that. It's very easy to pin our problems as adults on the dysfunction of our parents because of their problems. What you can consider in this is, what patterns did you toss or keep? And what's different about your life today, regardless of or because of how you were raised. Again, if you are coming from dysfunction and difficult circumstances as a child, and obviously, hopefully, if it's really bad childhood trauma and abuse and so on, you have the ability to work with a medical professionals, doctors, and so on to heal that. So my work is really rooted in offering tools and practices for us to incorporate into our life and adopt, maybe even as a life practice, to the extent that we can handle and go back and revisit things that were really bothersome for us, that they've really impacted our life negatively. For me, listen, my parents and how I was raised, and all the limitations I grew up with, and there was a ton of dysfunction, I'll tell you that. I had a one parent that I never knew was going to be alive or not when I got home from school for a number of years. That would be my mom. And so it was really easy for me to tie in when my daughter actually ended her life by suicide, as painful and as betraying as that felt and all this stuff. I was able to immediately see the theme of my life, and over the years, consider it more and more and more as the more I put a body of work together and made a commitment to go into the practicing, the coaching, the working with people. I was just able to see the larger picture in it. And so being mad at my mom, being mad at my dad, both of whom are deceased, carrying any anger towards them, and you wrecked my life, and all this stuff, it all started because of you. I didn't even go down that path. I stayed very, very true to the belief that I chose this. My mother gave me the theme that even today I don't place a lot of emphasis on her own suicide attempts until I was age 10, there were several of them, as anything really more than shaping my consciousness around. I knew about suicide from a very, very young age, probably didn't really understand it. But as I grew older and I grew into adulthood, I was very, very much aware of suicide. And perhaps it gave me a compassionate and empathetic position in life from far younger years than I otherwise would have growing up in just a normal, happy, everything's, wonderful family. I was faced with being able to make choices about how I didn't want to get stuck in that type of dysfunction, and I actually understanding what the dysfunction was. And that's something really key I want to point out here is you need to understand the precise dysfunction, if it isn't obvious, to sort of know how it's impacted you and what you want to target to heal. And a lot of us don't find that until much later in life. Just want to say, because it's really hard to consciously say, I'm blaming my parents. It's easier to just walk away from them. It really, truly is. And I've had siblings in my family walk away as well. One, is almost permanently gone. So I'm just saying that as you take on the enormity of the dysfunction or whatever else has felt neglectful in your life and decide to do something positive, change that experience, allow healing to occur, the more that you do allow yourself to heal, the tiny bit easier it becomes to forgive those that we blame for our situation. Or in some cases, it really was the other person's fault. It just becomes easier to forgive them, and most especially forgive our parents. In fact, it is being able to feel total unconditional love for your parents. And come on, they were your primary caregivers. They shape us. They teach us everything from the get-go. And then all the stuff that was maybe not very helpful or darn right painful or traumatic, we either have to undo in our adult years or we have to live with it. And those of us that choose not to undo and heal from all of that dysfunction will very likely succumb to it in many, many negative ways that impact not only our life until the end, but the lives of everybody else we bring into our world. So if I asked you right now, stepping aside from this parenting thing for a second, if you've come from a really, really difficult situation in childhood, you haven't dealt with your stuff, your baggage, your crap, right? If you are like that, do you really want to invite anyone into your world? And on the flip side, if you are a healthy or burgeoning healthy individual and you meet somebody with all that kind of baggage, is that who you want to tie yourself to for any length of time? Marry, be with for a number of years, go through all that hardship. It's one thing to get married or, sign up with another partner, soulmate, whatever for your life, and then tragedy strikes, and then sort of agree how you're going to go forward together. It's completely different to invite someone into your life like that and then take it all on either for or with them. Just saying. Anyway, the more that you can develop unconditional love for others, and especially your parents, the more you're able to fully love yourself and heal. And by the way, this includes relationships with parents who have abandoned you or have passed on, transitioned, died. If there was ever any business left unsaid, you didn't heal the relationship, you can still work with these concepts and a meditation I'm going to share in the link in the description that will help you forgive your parents. It's no accident that you are who you are and have experienced what you have experienced. However, it is up to you as to what you're going to do with it all, good or bad. So that's all I'm going to talk about in this coaching episode. As I said, next coaching episode, dropping in 2 weeks from this one, we're going to be talking about soul contracts and how that actually ties in to choosing your parents to your siblings, and a whole bunch of other things in your life. So I hope you enjoyed this one. If you do want to start working on yourself, I'll also have a link below to a personal growth journal. And once you've signed up for that, you can keep updated with anything that I'm going to be announcing around coaching and in terms of live group coaching that I'm going to be offering later on this year. And yeah, just become part of my community. So I look forward to seeing you on the next episode. And I do thank you for watching or listening. Until next time.